What if I told you that a single moment of arrogance could bring a billionaire to his knees? Harrison Sterling, a self-made titan of industry, thought he could crush a simple waitress with nothing more than his money and his words. But he had no idea that the person he was looking down on had something far more valuable than his millions: a sharp mind, a deep culture, and a well-hidden secret that would expose him for who he really was. Before we dive in, drop a comment and let us know where you are watching from. We would love to hear from you. If you enjoy stories like this, be sure to like the video, subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and share it with someone who would love it too. Now, let's dive into the story that no one saw coming. In a high-end restaurant in the heart of the city, marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and a menu that could feed a family for a year, if they had the right connections. At the center of the room sits Harrison Sterling, a man who has built his empire by stepping on anyone in his way. His success? Impressive. His attitude? Well, let's just say it left a lot to be desired. He leaned back in his chair, the sleek black suit hugging his frame like a second skin. His face, sharp and flawless, radiated confidence. Sterling wasn't just a billionaire, he was the definition of power. As his associates fawned over him, he made sure to let everyone around him know how insignificant they were in comparison. It was almost like he had an invisible crown perched on his head, and everyone else was merely a pawn in his grand game. And there, standing quietly at the side of his table, was Anya, a waitress. To Sterling, she was a blur in a black and white uniform, no different than the countless others who served him every week. But Anya wasn't just any waitress. She wasn't someone whose face he'd remember or whose presence he'd notice. No, she was a mere speck in his world of untouchable wealth. Sterling had no clue what he was about to unleash when he opened his mouth. With a smug smile, he leaned toward his associates, his voice low but cutting. "Watch this. People like her are so simple. You can say anything, and it just flies right over their heads." He nodded toward Anya, signaling her to come closer. She remained professional, her face a picture of calm, her eyes focused as she placed their water glasses down. Sterling smirked, and then, in slow, deliberate Japanese, continued. "She says, 'Of course, sir,'" mimicking her tone in a mocking, high-pitched voice. As if she could tell the difference between prime tuna and cat food. His associates chuckled, a nervous sound that barely masked their discomfort. Sterling, sensing their approval, grew bolder. He continued, "It's almost sad, isn't it? These people just don't understand the finer things in life." Anya didn't flinch. Her face remained neutral, her gaze steady. But what Sterling couldn't see was the fire that was quietly simmering behind her eyes. What he didn't know was that Anya wasn't the naive girl he thought she was. She wasn't just a waitress working a dead-end job. She was an educated scholar, fluent in Japanese, and deeply connected to the culture he so casually mocked. She had spent 3 years living in Kyoto, studying the language, the culture, the very people Sterling was trying to belittle. But her life had taken an unexpected turn. Her family's business collapsed, and she was forced to put her career on hold, taking multiple jobs just to keep her family afloat. This restaurant wasn't her dream. It was a stepping stone, a sacrifice. But in that moment, as Sterling continued his verbal assault, Anya knew that the time for silence was over. Sterling wasn't done. His ego had taken over, and he decided to turn the dinner into a performance, a cruel game where Anya was the punchline. "We'll start with the otoro," he ordered in English, dripping with false politeness. "And make sure it's fresh. I can't abide second-rate anything." Anya nodded politely. "Of course, sir." He turned back to his associates, and the mocking tone returned. "Did you hear that?" "Of course, sir." "As if she even knows what real tuna is," he said, chuckling under his breath. Pathetic. But Sterling wasn't satisfied with just mocking Anya's service. He moved into dangerous territory, using her as a prop in a larger conversation about his hostile takeover of a rival company. The CEO we're pushing out, he said, switching to Japanese, has the same empty look in his eyes. No fight, no vision. People who are content to serve are destined to be ruled. As he gestured toward Anya with his fork, Anya silently placed their water glasses down in front of them, each movement precise, the epitome of grace. To him, she was just a robot. But in truth, what he was witnessing was a perfect example of omoiyari, Japanese hospitality, the art of anticipating needs before they are asked. Anya's silence, her professionalism, was just one more reason Sterling felt comfortable continuing his tirade. The final insult came when Anya returned to take their main order. Sterling, sensing the moment was right, leaned back in his chair and said, with a face like hers, "She's lucky to have a job at all. She should be grateful we're even letting her stand at our table. This is as good as it's ever going to get for her." The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Sterling, drunk on his own power, didn't notice the shift in the room. Even the other diners seemed to feel the tension rising. The laughter from his associates had died down, replaced by uncomfortable silence. Anya finished writing down the order. For a long moment she stood still, her back straight, her eyes fixed on the table before her. And then, something in her snapped. She lifted her head, meeting Sterling's eyes for the first time, her gaze unwavering. The entire table fell silent. And then, Anya spoke. Her Japanese was flawless, not broken, not hesitant. It was perfect. She spoke with a level of formality so profound it was almost surreal. Her words were a blade wrapped in silk. "Suta ringuyang," she began, her voice steady, but there was no mistaking the irony in her tone. Sterling Sama, the highest form of respect, reserved for gods and emperors. The room was frozen. "You assume my position dictates my intellect?" she said, her eyes locked onto Sterling's. It is a common yet disappointing fallacy. Sterling's face drained of color. His smirk melted away. His associates looked like they'd seen a ghost. Anya's gaze never wavered. "You mentioned you cannot abide second-rate anything. It's a shame you don't apply that same standard to your character." And then, she turned her attention to Kenji, who had been silent but complicit in Sterling's cruelty. "Kenji-san," she said, her tone sharp and precise. "True respect for one's heritage isn't about speaking the language. It's about upholding its values, honor, humility, and values that you've clearly traded away." The entire room was quiet now. The clinking of forks had stopped. Even Sterling's associates couldn't bring themselves to speak. Anya's final blow landed softly but decisively. "You mentioned your business acquisition," she said, her voice calm. "You've overlooked a key detail. The lead engineer's patent portfolio is personally held. He licenses it to your company. The second he walks, your multi-million-dollar asset is worthless. What do you think Sterling learned from this moment? Was Anya right to expose his ignorance, or should she have let him continue his arrogant show? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe if you think arrogance can be a dangerous thing. The tension in the air was palpable now. Anya had done it. She had exposed the billionaire for his arrogance, revealing the fragile ego behind his polished exterior. Sterling sat there, stunned, his face a mask of disbelief as he tried to process the shift in the room. The confidence he had radiated only moments ago now felt like a distant memory. His associates exchanged awkward glances, unsure of what to do next. But Sterling wasn't one to back down. No, he had spent decades building his empire on the backs of people like Anya, people he thought were easy to dismiss, easy to control. And now, this young woman had embarrassed him in front of his own circle. Sterling wasn't used to being humiliated. No one ever dared to stand up to him like that. So, what did he do? He did what he always did when someone crossed him. He doubled down. He forced a smirk, though it looked like a desperate attempt to salvage what was left of his dignity. He leaned back in his chair, as if trying to reassert some form of power, but it was weak, forced. Anya's words hung in the air like a heavy fog, and there was nothing he could do to dispel them. But it wasn't over. No, Sterling had one more card to play, one more chance to take control. He glanced at his two younger associates, who were clearly uncomfortable with the situation. They had been laughing earlier, but now their faces were taut with concern. They looked to Sterling, waiting for him to respond. "Let's just drop it, okay?" One of them, Kenji, mumbled under his breath. "No need to escalate this further." Sterling's eyes flashed with anger, but he didn't acknowledge Kenji's comment. He was too proud to back down. He couldn't afford to lose face. He would regain control, even if it meant doubling down on his earlier insults. "I'm not finished," Sterling muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. Anya's eyes remained fixed on him, her expression unchanging. The calmness in her demeanor only seemed to intensify Sterling's frustration. He wanted her to crack. He wanted to see her flinch, to react, to show him that she was beneath him. But she didn't. She stood there, unwavering, like a rock in the middle of a storm. Sterling's mind raced. He was a master manipulator, a man who had conquered entire industries with his sharp wit and ruthless decision-making. But this woman, was different. She wasn't intimidated by his wealth, his position, or his words. She saw through him, and that terrified him more than anything. With a deep breath, Sterling leaned forward again, trying to salvage his dignity, his control. "So, you speak Japanese?" he said, his voice laced with mockery. "But what does that really mean? You're just a waitress. Nothing more. No matter how well you speak, you'll still be stuck in a job like this." His words were like daggers. The air in the room grew thicker, as if the weight of his words had turned it into a pressure chamber. Anya's hand tightened around the notepad she was holding, her knuckles white. But she didn't flinch. She didn't let his words cut her. But inside her blood boiled. What Sterling didn't know, what he couldn't see, was that Anya was fighting a battle far greater than his petty insults. She wasn't just standing up for herself. She was standing up for everyone who had ever been overlooked, underestimated, and dismissed. Her entire life had been a series of sacrifices, and she had spent years fighting for her family's survival. This wasn't about her job as a waitress. It was about something much bigger. She had already sacrificed her dreams for the sake of her family, but that didn't mean she would let this man trample on her dignity. Anya's face remained calm, but behind her eyes the storm was building. And then, just when it seemed like the insults were about to reach their peak, Sterling took it a step further. "You know, you're lucky to be here at all," he sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. "A face like yours? Well, it's a good thing we don't judge on appearances around here, right?" The words cut deeper than he knew. Anya's breath caught in her chest, but she kept her composure. She had heard worse. She had faced worse. But this was something different. It wasn't just about her. He was mocking an entire culture, an entire class of people he deemed beneath him, and that was something Anya would not stand for. Sterling was too lost in his own world to realize how deeply he was sinking. He couldn't see that he was not only losing control of the conversation, he was losing control of himself. His associates had stopped laughing. The room had gone from uncomfortable to suffocating. The tension was unbearable now. You could almost taste it in the air, the moment when everything was about to come crashing down. And then, Anya spoke again. Her voice was soft, but there was a power in it that seemed to echo through the room. "You talk about me, Mr. Sterling," she said, her words precise, her tone unwavering. "But you fail to understand one very important thing." Sterling paused, his face a mask of disbelief. His smug smile faltered for a moment, but he quickly regained his composure. Anya didn't wait for him to speak. She continued, her voice steady. "You think you can demean me because of my job. You think that makes me less than you? But you've completely missed the point." Sterling's eyes narrowed, a flicker of doubt crossing his features. His mind raced. What was she saying? He had never been spoken to like this. Not by anyone, not even the biggest competitors in his business. "I'm not what you think I am," Anya said, her eyes meeting his with a calm intensity that sent a shiver down his spine. "You don't know anything about me. You don't know who I am. But you will. You'll wish you had never crossed me." Sterling leaned back in his chair, his gaze still fixed on Anya. The room was deathly quiet now, as if the entire restaurant was holding its breath. Even the soft clink of silverware seemed to have faded away. Sterling's associates sat frozen, their eyes darting nervously between the two, unsure of what would happen next. Anya's words hung in the air, like a storm waiting to break. Sterling's arrogance, his carefully cultivated image, was beginning to crack. He had no idea what was coming, but what was coming next? That was the question, wasn't it? How would Anya respond? What would she do next? Would she expose him further, tear down his empire of arrogance, or would she let him off the hook? If you were in Anya's shoes, what would you do? Would you take the high road? Or would you show the world exactly who this billionaire really was? And just like that, everything was about to change. What would you do if you were in Anya's shoes? How would you stand up to someone who thought they were better than you? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe if you think people like Sterling need to be put in their place. You don't want to miss how this story ends. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. Harrison Sterling, the untouchable billionaire, sat there, his eyes wide, his arrogance completely shattered. His smug smile had vanished, replaced by a look of sheer disbelief. The room, once filled with the clatter of silverware and quiet murmurs, was now engulfed in silence, all eyes on him, waiting for him to respond. But there was no comeback. No snappy retort, no biting words. There was nothing. Sterling, the man who had crushed entire companies, who had walked into rooms and commanded attention with a single glance, was reduced to nothing more than a man standing in the wake of his own arrogance. He tried to speak, but his voice faltered, the words stuck in his throat. I didn't mean," Sterling muttered, his usual smooth tone now cracking. But Anya, standing tall and composed, didn't give him the satisfaction of a response. Instead, she simply turned on her heel, her back straight, her movements fluid as she walked away. She didn't need to say another word. She had already won. The battle was over. And Harrison Sterling had been defeated, not by brute force, but by the quiet power of humility, intellect, and dignity. Sterling watched her retreating figure, his mind still racing, trying to make sense of the turn of events. His world, once so carefully constructed, was now crumbling around him. What had just happened? How had he let a waitress, someone he'd considered beneath him, expose him in front of his own people? He couldn't fathom it. He had underestimated her in every possible way, and now there was no way to take back the damage. Anya's words had been sharp, calculated, and precise. She had taken him apart piece by piece, not with anger but with a quiet confidence that seemed to radiate from her. Sterling had called her second-rate, lucky, and beneath him. But now it was clear, he was the one who had been revealed as second-rate. His wealth, his status, all the things he had used to define his worth had been completely obliterated in that moment. And then, just when he thought the situation couldn't get worse, he saw it. her calm exit, her dignity intact. Sterling, now fully aware of his own vulnerability, felt his ego deflate like a balloon losing air. His associates, who had once looked up to him with reverence, now regarded him with a mix of fear and contempt. They had seen the emperor exposed for what he truly was, a man. Nothing more, nothing less. The evening dragged on in a haze of awkward silence. Sterling couldn't focus on the meal, the food, the conversation. It all seemed distant, irrelevant. All he could think about was Anya and how she had exposed him so effortlessly. But as the night wore on and the realization settled in, he knew he had to do something. He had to make amends. He couldn't just let it end like this. He couldn't let her walk away thinking she had won. Sterling left the table, his associates watching him as he walked toward the service station where Anya was working. He had a choice to make. His pride, the thing he had built his entire life around, was in tatters. But there was still time. He could offer her something that would make her see that he wasn't just a fool, that he was still a man of power. He found her, polishing a wine glass behind the counter. Her movements were slow, deliberate, almost meditative. She wasn't looking at him. She didn't need to. "Anya," Sterling said, his voice softer now, devoid of the arrogance he had carried earlier. I owe you an apology." She didn't look up, but she stopped polishing the glass, setting it down gently. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words. "You were right," Sterling continued, his voice betraying the defeat he had yet to fully accept. "I was wrong. About you. About everything. I shouldn't have said those things. I shouldn't have treated you like that. You deserve more respect." Anya's eyes finally met his. There was no anger there, no bitterness, just a calm, quiet understanding. "You're right," she said, her voice steady. "But respect isn't something that can be given on a whim, Mr. Sterling. It's something that has to be earned." Sterling's chest tightened. The weight of her words hit him harder than anything he had experienced before. He had always taken respect for granted, assuming it was a given, that it came with the territory of wealth and power. But Anya had just shown him that respect was earned, not bought. That lesson, humbling as it was, struck deep. "I understand," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "And I'll do better. I promise." The moment passed, and Anya turned her attention back to her work, but not before offering him a small, almost imperceptible nod. She wasn't going to let this moment define her. She wasn't going to be the one who got caught up in the drama of a billionaire's apology. No, her path was set. This was just one small, fleeting encounter in the grander scheme of her life. Sterling stood there for a moment longer, watching her. There was no offer of a job this time, no promises of money or positions. There was just the cold reality that Anya had walked away, leaving him to stew in the consequences of his actions. And somehow, that felt like the most fitting punishment of all. As Sterling turned to walk back to his table, his mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. Anya hadn't just exposed his arrogance. She had revealed something deeper. His own insecurity, his need to control, his fragile ego that couldn't handle the slightest challenge. She had cracked open the polished exterior and shown him for what he really was, a man who had lost sight of what truly mattered. And in the end, it wasn't about the business deal. It wasn't about the takeover or the millions he was set to gain. It was about the simple, quiet strength of a woman who had known exactly who she was and who had refused to let anyone, not even the richest man in the room, define her worth. As Sterling settled back into his seat, he couldn't help but think, was he really the one in control? Or had he just been a puppet, dancing to the tune of his own arrogance? What do you think? Was Harrison Sterling's apology enough to redeem him, or did he get exactly what he deserved? Could he ever truly learn the value of respect? or would he continue to operate in the same arrogant way? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that like button if you believe that dignity and respect can never be bought, only earned. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe for more stories that challenge the way we see power, respect, and the world around us. Thanks for watching.